Sairam, everybody, and it's exciting to see all of you in the very first session for the Sai 100 New Year, and we here are again back in our inspirational channel, and this time we have a speaker who's very exciting for us. He is none other than Brother Subramanian Sankaran. Um, I have the pleasure to introduce him. I'm Prasanna. I'm from Dallas Sai Center, and Brother Subramanian Shankaran is originally hailing from Chennai. He moved to US in the 1997 for his graduate studies, and then he came to Swami's fold in late 1980s through the forum of bhajans, just like most of us are, just attracted by the pure love and the music that the Swami gives. By Swami's grace and inspiration, he started to learn harmonium by himself several years ago and has always wanted to play for Bhagwan. An avid music lover, he believes that ocean is one of the most powerful mediums to converse with him. The music is one of the most powerful mediums to converse with him. With Swami's inspiration and grace, he has composed many bhajans and also had opportunity to offer devotional music CD to the Lord titled Be With Me, Bhagwan. He owes everything that he is to Swami, who is inspirer, and to his parents, who provided the best environment for him. He is very active and is been involved in Sai organization activities in the Northeast region. He holds an MS and an MBA degrees and works for AMD. Currently, he lives in Acton, Massachusetts with his wife Raji and two sons. They attend the Boston Sai Center. And he is also known to have conducted a lot of workshops for bhajan workshops, etc., even for our region in some centers. I hereby take the pleasure to welcome Brother Subramanian. Sairam, welcome you.
Oh,
And the floor is
Sairam,
yours.
brother. Thank you for the kind introduction. Om Sri Sairam, offering my most humble salutations at the lotus feet of dear Mother Sai. I pray to him so that his love speaks through me in this session and beyond. So, this topic for this new year is going to be on truth. Truth is a word which is very common to all of us. And it's aptly titled, as you see, Aham Satya Bodhakaha. In his avataric mission, Bhagwan declared in 1970 on a Shivratri day, he emphatically mentioned, started with this poem, Naham Manushyo, Nacha Deva Yaksha, Na Brahmana Kshatriya Vaishya Shudra, Na Brahmachari Na Gruhi Vanasto, Aham Satya Bodhakaha, Satyam Shivam Sundaram. I'm not a man, I'm not an angel, I'm not a demigod, I do not belong to any caste. I'm not a Brahmana, I'm not a Kshatriya, I'm not a Shudra, I'm not a bachelor, I'm not a householder, neither am I a recluse nor a mendicant. I am the teacher of truth. I am truth, auspiciousness, and beauty. He said, Satyam Shivam Sundaram. So he started off by saying, I am the propagator of truth. So, what exactly is this truth? Before we jump into the truth that Swami wants to talk about here, let us first dive into the question of what is the importance of this truth. Why does Swami hold this very, very high in the pedestal? How much importance he has given. And he says, if you just follow this value, everything else is taken care of. And truth is a very common word across the globe, from a toddler to an older person. Everybody knows this word. So it's not something to be defined from an English perspective. But the way Swami gives indication here is in the order of merit. He says, starting from digging wells to performing all the Aswamedha Yajna, horse sacrifices, this and that, all different kinds of virtuous activities that we do. He says none of them can match when you honor truth. He says everything else is second nature. The first thing that comes from a Vedic standpoint also is honoring truth. Such is the importance he gives for truth. And in fact, Sathya, as Swami puts in, it's called in the Vedas Sa, A, and Ya, which means Sa is Sama Veda, Akara is the Atharvana Veda, Yakara is the Yajur Veda. So Satya means all the three Vedas put together. In fact, speaking of Vedas, many of you might probably know Sri Bhasham Appalacharya, a very renowned scholar in ancient wisdom. He's from the Kakinada area in India. When he spoke in the Purnachanda Auditorium several years ago, he said Swami's name is Satya, not Satya Sai, but Satya Shai, which is the one who reclines on the bed of truth. And he said he's verily truth himself. He does not teach truth. He is verily truth himself, and he practices and propagates this particular truth, which is what the Bodhaka is. Swami Bhagavan is our Bodha Guru. In this world, there are a lot of Bada Gurus who inflict pain and other things. But here is our Bhagavan, who is a Bodha Guru, who gives so much of importance to this truth. And he, in fact, he says, all my discourses begin with truth and love, and it also ends with them. In fact, he quotes, he says, I may or may not speak on any other subject, but I dwell upon Sathya and Dharma in every discourse. He says, there is not one discourse I do not touch any one of these two topics. In 1996, he said, this is the reason why Satya and Prema are verily my life breath. And he holds it so dear and near to him, and he expects as devotees of Bhagavan Baba to uphold this truth in the highest possible way. We all know Harishchandra stories, we all know different Vedic stories that just shows how if you just uphold truth, truth itself will save you. And Swami says, you don't need to practice anything, any other value in the world. I used to wonder back then, wow, if I just uphold truth for a period of time and try to use it as a sadhana, which will be super close, which will make you super close to Bhagwan. In fact, in a letter in 1964, Swami said, who is an ideal Sai devotee? And he gives certain measures. And in that letter, the first thing Swami writes is, Satyanaveshana, the search for truth ought to be the Nitya Kritya of the Sai Bhaktas, which means this should be the daily activity of Sai Bhaktas. And he did not say once in a while, he does not say mostly. He says this should be your second nature. This should be the first and foremost. It's like life breath. Such is the importance he gives for this kind of a truth. Now, for the most of us, we know that this is nothing but worldly truth that we think. Looking at it from a truly worldly perspective, right? In fact, Swami jokingly says in a discourse, how easy it is to report like things as such without exaggerating it. Have we ever wondered when we talk in the world, we always try to add bells and whistles to the exact truth. He says, he gives an example. He says, if you ask who has done the translation, and you can at least quickly get a reply, Anil Kumar, who did the translation. This is Swami quoting. And he says, if you were to lie, you have to do a lot of planning. You have to undergo so much of difficulty to remember, to plan, to say a lie. So he says, it's so easy to speak truth. He says, this is the easiest habit because you don't have to remember how many lies you have to do, how many times you have to, in future, how many times you have to keep up that lie and all of that. And above all, think about it this way, brothers and sisters, right? Think of a time when you told a lie to somebody. How did you feel? And vice versa, think of a time when someone told a lie to you. How did you feel? And think of a time when you spoke the truth. How did you really feel? I always felt much, much lighter every time when you speak the truth. Yes, you may look stupid at that time for when the stakes are high, but you know what? It makes it super, super easy. You're out of tension. Hey, you spoke the truth. Even if somebody wakes you up at 3 a.m. in the morning, you're going to speak the truth. And he says it's so easy. To utter a lie is so difficult in this world, Swami says. With all of these being said, what we're going to see in this session is not the worldly truth. Swami says, what you see in the world, this is Prakriti Satya, which is the worldly, Prakriti Satya, which is the worldly truth. And Swami says this is related with the outward path here, right? What you see, the worldly path, worldly truth is more of an outward path. The inward path, which is the nivritti, which is related to the fundamental truth. Because Swami says here, this truth can change, right? Because we take all the inputs from the external senses, and then we gather data, we gather information. This is our knowledge, this is our scholarship. But with the passing of time, even this truth can change. What I believe it in today, I may not believe tomorrow. What my ideas is today will not be relevant tomorrow. Right? What our discoveries today may be totally different 6 months from now. Does that mean it's not truth? So this is where the relative truth may not be true. So Swami says what we hear, what we see, all these facts are not truth. He says that which changes with the change of time is not truth. That which remains constant with the passage of time is truth. He says that which is changeless. Today I may wear a pant and shirt. Tomorrow I may wear something else. I may wear a suit. I may wear this. But those things may change. But the I part of myself is the truth, which is changeless. So that which remains unchanged in 3 periods of time, which is Trikala Badhyam Satyam, is what Swami says. Truth remains the same excuse me, in all 3 periods of time, the past, present, and future. This truth, so what is that truth that Swami is referring? Right? So Swami says there is a fundamental truth in this whole scenario, which we're going to probably dive deeper. And if we have more time, because this is something that, I'd like each of you to think about it in the most practical way as possible, as much as possible. First of all, Swami says the inward path, which is the related to the fundamental truth, is the most important, which never changes over time. And Swami has stressed so much importance to this fundamental truth. And what is this fundamental truth? This is not a new concept for many of the Sai devotees across the globe. Swami says each of us is God in a different form. He says this does not change in the passage of time, which we all know that in the grand scheme of things, Swami says seeing God in everyone, which is what Swami has preached over decades and decades and decades. And even in the ancient, even in the Vedas, it is said, Sahasra Shirusha Purusha, Sahasrakshat Sahasrapata. God is everywhere. He has 1,000 ears, 1,000 heads. He is everywhere. We know the concept very, very clearly in our head. Right? But the most important thing for this fundamental truth is it's a 3-step process for us to realize. Number 1, knowing. Knowing this fundamental truth that God, each of us is God in a different form. Myself, Prasanna, who is in this call, he is God in a different form. Likewise, every single person in the world is God in a different form. The second step, I knew, this is the first step as part of knowing. The second step is the awareness. Because knowing is just the first step. Awareness, we're going to dwell into these 3 different steps to make it super practical in our day-to-day lives. The second step is the awareness, which means I have to be aware and conscious of this fact that when I start my day-to-day life, how do I know when I come across people, when I come across people who are nicer, who are not nice, being neutral, all different kinds of aspects. How am I conscious? How am I aware of the situation? Next step is, how do I make it a second nature for me? So it is not just enough to know, it is not just enough to be aware of this fundamental truth that God is in each one of us. It is more important to have a constant remembrance in such a way that realizing this truth becomes our second nature. So as you see, we just cannot reach the truth on our daily, day-to-day lives, this fundamental truth on a day-to-day basis, unless we travel through these steps here. So first, let's look at the knowing part of it. We'll spend a little bit of time in knowing. If you look at what Swami says here, Swami says it is essential to realize the basic truth that God is present in the form of human beings. As simple as that. And he did not say it is essential to know the basic truth. He says it is essential to realize the basic truth. There is a big difference because most of us seem to know theoretically really, really well. In fact, Swami said, Ravana mastered all the Vedas, and the entire Lanka would reverberate with Vedas, but he did not practice an iota of it. In fact, in the management side of things, there is a concept called mile wide, inch deep, and inch wide, mile deep. What this means is I can know many, 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 many topics across the globe, even in spiritual context. I can know all the Sathya Sai speaks. I can know, every Sathya Sai speaks, summer showers, everything that Swami talks about. Oh, yes, this is in chapter 25. This isn't. Knowing is great. I can go mile wide. But the inch wide depth is not going to help us when it comes to Bhagavan. What Swami expects is, even if you had learned inch wide, how deep you go into that matters. So this is why more than the mile wide, inch deep scenario, the inch wide, mile deep is so relevant to us as Sai Bhaktas. This is one way to gauge ourselves, how much of practice that we know, that we can do. So knowing is just the first step that we talked about. And in fact, all this information, yes, I know that God is in every one of us. God is, human in different form. All of this these information just stays as information as long as this information does not create a change of behavior in us. If it does not create transformation within us, there is no point on this information, because information just stays as information. It will not go beyond anywhere. And Swami says, in fact, in a discourse, he said, I do not want devotion. I want only transformation. He says devotion tatkalikaman. So he says it's very temporary. Transformation is permanent, Swami said. So in fact, he goes to say, what's the difference between the book and the brain? He says most people are, heroes in brain, but zeros in practice. So knowing is just the first step. In fact, we attain so much of knowledge that, interestingly, I'm reminded of a couple of incidents when I visited India recently. We know that the concept of God lives in human forms in all of us, in every jiva rasi that we see in the world, in this universe. I was at a medical store in India, and it's very interesting that when the store got opened in the morning, whatever time it was, and a person rushes to the medical shop in India, He says, I really need these medication right now. And the shopkeeper started to do arti to all the gods' pictures there. And he said, wait. And here is a person who is struggling hard because he needed this medication to give it to someone else at the absolute emergency. And he says, no, I want to do arti first to God and then give it to you later. Little did he realize that this man could be needing it more than that God. More than the arti. At that time, what is more essential is to treat this human in the God form. Many a times we fall prey to that. We realize we don't see the godliness in a human form, the urgency, the need. In fact, we go to many spiritual places, including, we go to Puttaparthi, and typically what we do is in the name of spiritual growth, sometimes what we end up doing is we get annoyed with people around. We cannot tolerate some kid crying right next to us and we get upset. Wow, I cannot sleep in my own room. There is noise. We are in a place of the highest abode of peace. But what I'm trying to say here is, in the name of spiritual growth, sometimes it's so important that the ultimate goal is to realize with your fellow human beings, there is this God that's present in various forms. And these are available for us in day-to-day lives. In fact, the bhajan, the service activities that we all do, it's all catered towards identifying this aspect, which is very easily said, but it's so difficult to practice. This fundamental truth is so important because a lot of times when we do bhajans, when we do service activities, it is like the diving board, right? Where the swimmer tries to jump from the diving board into the swimming pool. More than many a times, what we end up doing is to keep jumping on the diving board all the time without jumping into the water. And that's what we end up doing. We do bhajans, we do service activities, we have to use these bhajans and service activities as a diving board and not dwell on the diving board, rather jump into the swimming pool. But these tools are given in such a way that, hey, from the diving board, jump into the swimming pool. But we just end up focusing more on the diving board itself to say, hey, how many bhajans did I say? Oh, great study circle, great service activities, great bhajans. We end up, really praising the entire diving board more than this jumping into the swimming pool. So what Swami talks about here is knowing is just the first step. But this, in spirituality is so important because everything seems to be super aspirational for us, right? Because we need to have that thirst within us. We need to go after certain truth, because nothing will be given to you unless that thirst is within us. It is going to be very difficult for us to chase something in spirituality, right? Because that soul searching, that wanting something, right? We should feel a gap within us, a thirst, the urge. It's a good divine discontent, if I may use a word there, right? Because it's so important. Once you start to do, you will feel uncomfortable in a good way. You start to ask questions to yourself, why are these happening? Because you go into the mode of the seeker, which is the jignasu, which is the first step into jumping from knowing to awareness phase. Because so far we are still in the knowing phase. Everybody in the world would know this upside down if I ask, hey, God lives in each one of us. Everybody can say, even at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. But the first step from jumping from knowing to awareness is the mindset of a seeker, mindset of a jignasu. So again, these are the faults that I try to make in my daily life, because I try to reinforce these thoughts within myself so that my ears are closest to my mouth. So this many times I try to say this myself, it makes it easier for me to reinforce the idea of practicing this. So Now we jump into the next phase, which is the awareness. Because the awareness is a phase, it's a very interesting phase, right? Because now the search, now I know the concept, but I wanted to use this in my daily life. I want to use this fundamental truth that Swami talks about in my day-to-day life, because I want to make this truth as a regular activity. For that to happen, right, the training has already been given to us. Swami has given all of these in wide variety of discourses. And Sai Rhythms, obviously, who many of us know, it's an ocean of discourses where every topic you see, he has given multitude of discourses. The training ground has already been set. Now it is up to us to jump into action wise, right? Every time a situation comes, how does this help me to be aware of the situation? Hey, are these helping me? It's like the bhajan that says, ek pag aage, do pag piche, which means we go one step forward, two steps backward. This is probably our lifestyle, at least my lifestyle. Every step I take forward, I take two steps backward. So the first step in realizing is these are conscious choices. When I have an occasion on a day where I have an opportunity to realize this, this is a conscious choice I make to say, hey, do I behave this way, or do I behave the way that Swami likes it? So this is a conscious choice that I try to make. And as we were looking at this in terms of the excuse me, overall awareness, I came across Swami's Chinnakatha, and these Chinnakatha stories are, it's called Chinnakatha, but it has the biggest lesson in our lives. So this story had made a huge impact. I've seen many people talk about, seeing God in everyone, but I felt it's so important that this particular story was the most practical, that we can try to use it in our daily lives. The story goes like this. So there was an ashram in the Ganges side, right? That Swami, the way he puts it, was in the along the sides of Rishikesh. And it's a huge ashram. There was a guru. There were many devotees, many sadhaka, spiritual seekers who are good people. And as they were leading their lives, searching towards the truth, there were a lot of conflicts among the ashram people. There were quite a bit of discord. There was quite a bit of disharmony. There were conflicting interests, and they started to argue more and more as months passed by. Then the guru started to give more discourses, more and more, upanyasas, and so on and so forth. But nothing did make a change in their behavior. So this guru was very much vexed, and he said, what am I supposed to do now? I did everything I can. These are good people. Know that these seekers are good people. It's just a conflict of interest, and makes them, fight among themselves, so on and so forth. Then this guru started to go do some penance. He said, I'm going to go do penance in a place. And he started to do penance, seek God's help here. When he started to seek God's help, he went into a silence mode. And after several days passed by, he got his vision. And the vision, God appeared in front of him. And he said, what do you want? And the guru narrated exactly what happened. He said, all these ashramites, they're fighting. They're good people, but they're still fighting. I want you to help me solve this problem. Then God said, is this all? I will definitely solve this problem without a question. And then the guru was super thrilled. But God put a condition. He said, I will come to your ashram. The guru was even more excited. Oh my God, I didn't ask for this one. This is great. Why would you say no when God comes into your ashram? But he said one condition: I will not come in this form. I will come in the form of one of the inmates in the ashram. And I will keep moving from one inmate to another inmate. I'll take up a different form of each of these inmates. He said, okay, fine. Go tell this to your ashram people. Then the guru returned back to the ashram and he said, God is going to visit us. God is going to stay here for however long it is. And then he put this condition. From that point onwards, all these ashram people, all these so-called devotees, seekers, they could not fight among themselves, because the moment they started to fight, they started to think, oh my God, what if God is disguised in the guy next to him? Maybe I should not fight with him, because you never know in what form God has taken shape. This prevailed for some time, and finally this ashram was completely of no fights, no quarrels, nothing, and it became a heaven of peace and harmony. Now, brothers and sisters, this is a story which has a huge impact in our day-to-day lives. Because God cannot appear like a 12-foot Ajanubha, like a all these things, right? He can very well be disguised. Imagine in our day-to-day lives, right? If this feeling, if we can make our family think that way, our society, the friends, the family, everyone, right? If we can think that he can be with your neighbor, he can be with the person that you're talking to. It's not disguising him, right? It's basically he could very well be. If we have that thought, how would our experience be? Every person that I'm talking to, as God said, I will jump from one person to another. In reality, that is what God is doing. You never know when we fight with someone, when we quarrel with someone, when we do all of these, be it home, outside, friends, work, everywhere. How do you know that God is not with that person? Which means we had the audacity to do that, knowing that Swami is in that person. So this is the first takeaway for me. So the first thing is, how do we ensure that we bring this awareness of this kind of a promoting harmony in every place that we are, be it home, work, friends, family, and so on and so forth. Next, this is one end of the spectrum, right? The other end of the spectrum, I wanted to just pause for a second. A few months ago, as I was discussing with a Sai brother in our area about some things about the Sai centers and many things here, and about different people one of the days. The following morning, early morning, I had a dream of Bhagwan, and it was a very brief message. All it had was, Swami said, he showed this kind of garland. He just put it there, and he said at that time, these flowers do not understand that the underlying string is me. This is all the message. And then the dream disappeared. And Swami appeared very stern, talking to me. And clearly I knew that, something was wrong that with me. And as I dwelled on this one, I thought to myself, you know, many a times, if you look at the way Swami put this message was, made me introspect more and more. He says, these flowers do not understand that the underlying string is me. I went and researched on this. I went to Swami's discourses and started to dig in what exactly Swami means by this. And especially when I started to prepare for this talk, Swami made a huge revelation, which is very surprising to me. This dream occurred on 9th October 2024. And when I went and looked in Swami's discourses, brothers and sisters, on 9th October 2005, Swami has talked about exactly this in his discourse, in his Dasara discourse. He said, he held a bunch of flowers in front of the audience, and Swami asked, "What is this?" And Swami said, "It is a bunch of flowers." And he said, there are a number of flowers that strung together with the help of a thread, with the result that it assumed that it formed a bunch. Though the flowers are of different varieties, the thread that holds them together is the only one. Exactly on the 9th of October is when I had the dream where he conveyed the same exact message. Now I knew that the Sutradhari is him. Many times, if you look at it, our connection, we go to Sai centers, we go to all of these places, like these flowers, right? As Swami says, he showed a bunch of flowers. He said, how are these flowers connected? And these flowers are tightly strung. How are these tightly strung? Because there is a thread. Thread in Sanskrit is sutra, which is Sutradhari. He is the one underlying thread which you may not see with our eyes. For example, let's say Prasanna, who is in this call, my connection with Prasanna is not that direct connection. I like Swami and my connection with Swami, and Prasanna likes Swami, and the way with me and Prasanna is through Bhagavan. So as long as we realize that the thread is the one, because of the thread, this garland has a meaning. Otherwise, this thread this garland has no meaning. If these flowers are independent, although they are different types, different kinds, they assume no meaning. They do not take the shape of the garland if the string is not there. We oftentimes forget the roots of a tree, which is not seen, but that's the one that is causing more robustness, stability. That's the life breath. Same thing with this. Unfortunately, without knowing this, we either in the previous case of this Chinnakatha, where either we end with too much disharmony or we are overly attached. We go to Sai centers knowing that the fundamental reason for going to centers is because of Bhagwan. And we tend to go closer to everyone. We get overly attached with every single person, needing to know everything in everyone's lives. But what is so important is keeping in connection, the thread, which is more important. And the critical thing here is, in terms of awareness, we have to look at two different things. If this is the spectrum that we see, based on the first story, we saw so much of disharmony because we fundamentally forgot, or we don't realize it's him who's the underlying person who's living in all of us. Or in the second example, like the thread, like the garland, we become overly attached. These are the two ends of the spectrum that we always operate on. Either we jump into some kind of a situation where there is some kind of discord, there's some kind of disharmony, where Swami promotes unity, or the other way, which is fundamentally we get way too attached that we fundamentally forget the Sutradhari. Instead, Swami says, if you understand that he is the indweller, every connection to every single person goes through him. If we try to remember, be aware of this fact, the fundamental truth is easily achieved than what we think. Imagine this, right? We're trying to simplify things here, not to get extremely quarrelsome, not to get too attached. In fact, Swami says, I'm neither attached nor detached. So I used to wonder, Swami, what is that? Which is a phenomenal principle in itself. But coming back to this, the first step is the awareness. The goal is for us is to operate in the middle ground as much as possible. Not to get so contained within the disharmony phase or the over-attachment phase. With our fellow Sai brothers and Sai sisters, right? It's so important because the center of attention is him, the focus is him. Even among in Swami's students, in Swami's institute, you'll never see the students get closer to each other. Swami always says, God is the only friend to be closer. So let us be very, very clear that we have to start reinforcing this awareness part of it, which is the second step for us. If we get into either ends of the spectrum, we have to be aware that he is aware. Are we aware that he is aware? When we come to Sai Center, when we see the altar, are we aware that he's sitting there? Are we aware that he's watching? It is not an empty chair, as Professor Kasturi said in his book, Loving God. No chair is an empty chair. So to be very conscious of it, this is the second step in terms of jumping from knowing to awareness. Now, the interesting part is, as part of awareness, we know, the interesting part is, it is not that it is not that we do not know what to do. We do not do what we know. It's very interesting phenomenon because all of these concepts, we know it. It's not like we don't know. We know it by heart. We don't do what we know is the problem. Swami has been emphatically saying it, practice this. This is the only practice that you would need. Right? Being good, finding that kind of godliness in everybody. So how do we make this a practice? How do we make this a constant remembrance, right? Which is the final step, and which is the most important step that we have. And for that, here is Swami has always said, constant remembrance is the constant presence, right, that he has for us in the form of conscience. He says, I'm always ready to help. But not through physically, but he says, I'm there 24/7, 365 days. I'm there to make sure to raise this awareness to a constant remembrance phase, which means knowing that inside of you, of every single person, he's ever available in the inner form of conscience. What is that conscience? And he says, no matter who this person is, I'm always available in the form of conscience. Which most of us would know, this conscience is readily available. Imagine this, right? Where you are in the thick and thin of a highway. I'm sure many devotees would have had their own experiences of how, Swami has provided thoughts from within. So now this is what we're going to see. And what I'm going to probably spend next, 10 minutes or so is how this conscience, how should one follow the conscience in a practical way. And the most important thing is, if you have not read, I think it's Dhyanavahini chapter 6. And Swami here very clearly talks about, if you have not read just chapter 6, please try reading chapter 6, especially the last few paragraphs. He gives a blueprint for life, how one should be. And he gives an analogy of a director-writer thing. And I will probably read from his passage. And Swami says, we're all actors in the Lord's play. It is, again, imagine every time we read it, we imagine this is in our day-to-day. It's not something out of the ordinary. It's pretty much everyday, day-to-day life, how to use our conscience. Swami says, we are actors in the Lord's play. All living beings are on this stage. It's like, let's imagine that this world is a stage. And every actor takes their exit when the curtain is rung down or when their part is over. Imagine, right? Because our grandparents, great-grandparents, they all came to this stage, world called stage, and their time over, their exit happened, and tomorrow, and your kids are here, and there'll come a time where your time will, you'll move on. So the world is a stage, that Swami says, and here on this stage, one may play a part of a thief, or one may play a part of a king, or one may play as a part of clown or a beggar. For all the characters, Swami says, there is only one person who gives the clue. He says, the prompter will not come upon the stage to give the cue. And he says, because it won't be fun, right? Because if he just comes and says, do this, do that, they won't be fun. But here he says, he stands behind a screen at the back of the stage. He gives the cue to all the actors. Every single person, no matter what their credentials are. He says, for every single person I give it. Hey, do this, don't try do this, don't do this way, be it a dialogue or any kind of thing, right? He tries to give you, then imagine if it's a stage, there is audience also, which is the world. Because you're facing the world, but you know what? You have God right behind you to give the prompt. You have God right behind you to give the cue. Every stage of the game. Am I receptive to it? Is the biggest question. He says, all we need to do is just act out our script. We have to memorize our lines here. And Swami says, each actor must be conscious of his presence behind the screen of illusion. And here's the important part. He says, when we are acting out, the director stands behind, when he gives this, how alert are we? How receptive are we? Right? It's so important to see. He might give, faint ideas. Are we catching that? And he says, when you get onto the stage, you have to remember all the lines, because you have to still do your role. It's not like just because I see somebody as God, I'm not going to go, take arti for this person, whoever I meet, just like how I see God in that person. That's not what Swami means here. What Swami means here is, as long as I complete doing my duty, this is what he says, when you must first learn the lines well, which means you have to discharge your duty to the perfect extent. Hey, this is my acting, my role given, and my fellow players, whether it's family, work, friends, everybody is doing their role. And the most important thing at the end of it, Swami says, the attention must be on both the lines one learned for the role and the stage manager's direction. This is the catch of the entire thing. Because I cannot say, I'm just discharging my duty, I'm not able to hear the cue, or I'm only hearing the cue, I cannot act in the world. You have to do both. It is so vital that we have to keep an ear in terms of how do we practice this, doing both. You know what this helps is, imagine you're an actor, right? When you go home, when somebody criticizes you, when somebody praises you, it'll make you to have a different perspective in life, because there'll be some kind of a space between how you act, and you won't be you know really going down mentally depressed or fatigued, because you know that you're also playing the role, and the fellow people on the stage is also playing a role. It is so important to keep a cue. What this gives you is your way of interaction with the world will be very, very different, because you will not say, yes, I'm seeing God. No, but you are practicing that because you know that you still have to discharge the duty, but you know that these people are just doing their roles just like how you're doing. If things don't go in your way and people criticize you, maybe you think, hey, they're not doing their role properly. Maybe the person maybe God will give them a cue to play their role well tomorrow. It's interesting that many times I've had Sai devotees who don't go and you know if they want to say something good or bad to them, if they need something from them, they go tell Swami, because they feel like, when I go tell Swami, obviously the desire or the whatever the need is being taken care of. So it's important that you always depend on the cue and you rely on the discharging worldly duty. So it's two different things that you have to be aware of. Now, how do I do both? Right? It's so important. And Swami gives a beautiful example, and this is so important to dwell on this. Swami says, you see women carrying pot on their heads. In India, many people would have seen. Swami says she'll be talking and joking along with all other women, and is quite free as she walks along. Right? We all know. And when people hold their hands, and Swami says she takes great care of the pot of water on the head. It's not like she's always keeping her hand on the head, on the pot. What she does is she's still engaged in the world. She talks to her fellow people. Yet her hand is always, always on the pot. How is she able to do both? It's the exact same thing in the previous slide that you saw, where Swami says you have to act out your role, but also listen to the cue. Swami never said, yes, you cannot be, you have to do one or the other. Both are the same. It's just that it should be your second nature. In this case, the connection to the pot and the cue that you're able to hear. This should be your second nature every time. And Swami says, when we live in the normal world, he does not want you to go to Himalayas and just go by yourself. He doesn't want you to go live in a hut or anything like that. He says, be engaged in the world, discharge all your duties to the fullest extent, but always, just like how these ladies have their hands on their pot, the connection is always there for them, no matter what. They're joking, they're talking. So it's so important to have this kind of connection. Swami gives another example a year later in Summer Course 1977. He says when a dancer is dancing, carefully, she moves her limbs according to the rhythm. The most important thing here is when you fulfill the daily duties, man must keep his attention fully focused on spiritual matters while discharging the duties. This is where listening to the cue, how we can know the fundamental truth that matters. Now, I know we have about 5 minutes remaining. If we connect the dots now, let's start from the top. We started off with Aham Sathya Bodhaka. What Swami says is, I am the teacher of truth. And he talks about worldly truth, where he says, hey, worldly truth is so easy to speak truth, it's very difficult to lie. And he says, but that's not the only one that I'm stressing upon. what I'm stressing upon is the fundamental truth, which is each of us is God in human form. Every single person that you come in contact with is that. And then through the garland example, he showed all these flowers, all these people, we're all tied by Bhagwan only. It is because of Swami only we are able to, exist. We are able to connect within ourselves. And then furthermore, he says, in order to realize this awareness, we have to go to the constant remembrance phase. How does that happen? It happens through following our conscience. And the most important is to be receptive of the cue. How do we be receptive? When we are receptive to the cue, we become the Sathya Bodhakaha. Everything that comes out of you becomes the truth. Everything that comes out of you is truth, and every action becomes dharmic. In that case, as Swami says, if Swami asks us, is your message, is your life my message of truth? Then you can say, yes, Swami. If we follow these dots, obviously our lives will be his message of truth, what he is expecting in his own language of finding God in every single person. This is the practical way, brothers and sisters. Please try it in your own daily lives of the stage play. Imagine, create a gap between the original you and the actor you. You'll see many times all these differences that exist will be solved, without you realizing, because you're connected with him. You're still engaged in the world, but you're still floating. Finally, with a minute, I want to make sure, I want to close this with this. When Buddha left his mortal coil in the stage, there was one of the devotees who was with Buddha for several years, and he was yet crying. And Buddha asked, why are you crying? And he said, you're leaving. But Buddha said, he has given you everything now. And yet he kept weeping more and more. And at that time, Buddha said, what does the spoon know to taste the soup? What it means is the spoon mostly takes the soup, and when we put it in our mouth, the spoon cannot taste the soup, which means we can carry information, we can carry messages, we can carry Swami's discourses like a spoon. But as long as the spoon has no feeling to it, if we don't absorb the messages, we will always remain spoon and we can never taste the soup. On the other hand, if we use a tongue, the moment the soup hits the tongue, we will taste it. Even if it's there for a split second. We can carry the messages in the spoon for years and years and years, yet the spoon can never taste the soup. But it's our own choice whether we want to be a spoon or we want to be a tongue. Especially on this 100th year of Bhagwan's centenary celebrations, let us pray collectively that the fundamental truth of seeing God in every one of us, may Bhagwan help each one of us to realize this. With that, I think we hit about a 1 hour mark, and I seek Bhagwan's blessings to end this Jai Sai Ram.
Sairam, such an excellent satsang today. To begin with, the Sai 100 year, to understand the basics of um, understanding and dwelling upon himself and bringing in that constant integrated awareness, and how to bring it forward in a step by step easy process, how Bhagwan outlined to all of us. It's really great and pleasure to have you with us, brother. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
With that, I want to just pass on a few announcements here. Of course, we will have our next set of inspiration channels during every month. We usually have it in the first week Wednesdays of every month. This month being a little exception just because of the new year, we kept it for the second week of January, but usually we do it on the first week of every Wednesday, first Wednesdays of every month. So we'll continue to have that with new speakers inspiring us with Bhagwan's message, helping us to indwell his message and follow that, help us practice that, remind us and practice that for every single time. With that, the other announcement I have is for us to think about marker calendars for the national conference that is about to happen in Dallas. This is right after Guru Purnima for that week in July. Guru Purnima celebration in Dallas will happen on the 10th and the 11th and the 12th. We will have the national conference. The details of this conference will be announced little sooner. But I want you guys to mark the calendar. So this will be an excellent opportunity to come together as a Sai family and participate in the satsang if we can. So with that, I pray to Swami uh, to having given this chance to start this wonderful satsang and his centenary celebrations with this excellent message. And thanks to Swami, thanks to Brother Subramanian, and with that we'll conclude with one more mantra Shantis. I want
So
to
thank you.
see if Brother, if you can close it with close us
Sure.
through the prayer, it'll be great.
Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.